important point, also considering the whole question of the emphasis, certain emphasis in the content of the sutta. For instance, emphasis that we find in the Bhayabherava Sutta. In this sutta, under discussion, the emphasis is on the lifestyle of a wanderer. The emphasis on simplicity, detachment, even forest wandering. And we saw the Buddha stressing that and himself exemplifying that. So there must be important meaning in such sutras. So in brief, in connection with what we say about the sources of the material, here also we have to consider that this kind of emphasis represents one type of emphasis, important emphasis in Buddhism, at least in the early form of Buddhism. That is the emphasis of simplicity, of wandering. And this is in contrast to the emphasis on communal living, for instance, among the Sangha members. So how did this emphasis come about? Well, possibly it has to do with the source that we talk about, the source of this kind of teaching and the audience of the Buddha, the audience that are intended by the compiler of the sutras. And they are the monks, they are the practitioners, and so on. There are many questions connected. We shall not discuss them now, but we look at this emphasis on wandering in the forest. Now, today it's not possible for us to rush to the forest and live there, especially for people in a society like Hong Kong, for example. But we must be able to be inspired by the ideal, the emphasis. That is the emphasis, the ideal of simplicity, of being less involved in personal relationship, less involved in societal interaction, and having few needs. These are the ideal. These are the values stressed in the sutra like the Bhayabherava, and this is a very important of Buddhism. We also, in this connection, we talk about this whole ideal being also found and perhaps emphasized in the extreme form in certain suttas that we find, for instance, in very ancient sutta, in the Sutta Nipada. One well-known one is called Kakka Visana. That is the horn of a rhinoceros. The idea of being alone, and you have to practice your spiritual life alone, wandering. Now we saw that according to the commentaries, these kind of sutras are said to have been preached by the Pacceka Buddhas. That's a very interesting point. It's very difficult to understand, to accept that indeed that this sutta have been composed even before the Buddha's time. It's not quite possible. And I would tend to believe that actually it was composed actually in the Buddha's time also, but then by certain communities of monks who emphasized the ideal of wandering. And there are reasons why this is connected with the Pacceka Buddha and so on, which we discussed last night. But anyhow, the main point is to feel and be inspired by this ideal of simplicity, and the Buddha exemplified it. And we went back to look at the fourfold remarks by the Brahmin on the Buddha. Remember? And he observed that first of all the Buddha was a leader. Secondly, that he bestows spiritual help or benefit. And thirdly, he is an inspirer. And fourthly, he concretely provides example. He exemplifies the ideals in his very conduct, in his very own living. So these fourfold characteristics represent, if you like, the ideal of the role model of a spiritual teacher. The Buddha has to be a leader. He must lead. So that's very different from ordinary institutional structure. People talk about democracy, and you need a big, huge, powerful group of, committee members, and they will argue, they will fight, they will decide on things. But in the case of a spiritual community, you need someone who can really lead you. It's not it can't be democracy at least in the sense that democracy is a very vague, fluid term and relative concept. But certainly it's not democracy in the sense of let us as a group decide what we have to do for this movement or this society, and then those who can fight, who can argue strongly enough, whose voice is stronger will win. Or who has more dominant personality will win, for example. Or you can have kind of political type of manipulation, maneuver, and you can buy your groups and you can vote in members in favor of your view, and hence all this confusion and conflicts in any institutional structure. Now the spiritual community cannot be like that. There must be a teacher who can lead in the spiritual sense. The Buddha is not a leader in the sense of being an institutional head. He never thought of himself as such. We saw that in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. He also declared that he had never assumed that kind of role as a leader in that sense. And certainly not like a leader in the sense of an army leader, for example. But he became naturally the leader. He had got to be a leader in the spiritual sense, because he is the wisest, he is the most compassionate, he has got the more wisdom, he has got the greater levels of achievement spiritually. In the case of Buddha, it was the highest level, of course. So that shows the ideal of a spiritual community, which necessarily must have a leader in that spiritual sense, in a natural way. It's not a question of power over others, authority over others, but in the sense of power or authority that comes naturally among people who follow you. They look up to you, they need your guidance, and your very purpose is for that. Otherwise, why do you want to have a group of followers? Because you want to lead them, you want to guide them with your wisdom. They need your instruction, they need your guidance. So the Brahmin noted that, observed that, and commended that Buddha was a leader. And Buddha confirmed that. In fact, confirmed all these 4 points. Secondly, in leading, he must be able to bestow spiritual benefit. So he's said to be a helper, and he's said to be described as being bahukara, greatly helpful. And it's of course, obviously, it's not in the sense of helping you by, for instance, running courses for you even, or organizing, welfare, financial aids for you. Not in that sense. If you need time to meditate with the teacher must be prepared to give some time. If you need time to share the Dhamma, the teacher must be prepared to share the Dhamma. All these things benefit in a spiritual sense. If you need the teacher to point out to you certain negativity in you, the teacher should do that. Instead of just pleasing you, for instance, just superficially, hypocritically pleasing you in order to retain you in his group. So it's not like that. So the leader, particularly we are talking now about the Buddha, we fall far short of that ideal. Okay, we can't compare ourselves to the case of Buddha, but we have to be inspired by his example. That's what it means to be a Buddhist, to learn from them. Okay? So this is the second aspect. The third aspect observed by the Brahmin was that the Buddha was inspired. How does he teach? Why do we call the Buddha a creative teacher? In what sense? He doesn't demand, but he inspires. So this is how we should understand Buddhism. Even in regard to the question of so-called moral codes or precepts, they are not commandments on us. They are not demand from the Buddha. So we should still inspire. Oh, I am ashamed if I fall short of the holy, sacred ideal. Let me see what I can do. Let me see how I should conduct myself. Let me see how I should struggle when I fall down. So you learn to conduct yourself. You choose to tune into the recommendation, the guides by the Buddha, by the teachers. So this is by way of inspiration. That aspect is extremely important, and we're going to elaborate on that in the course of our future discussion. I have done that many times from different perspectives. So in brief, the Buddha's teaching, the Buddha as a leader, the Buddha as a benefactor, as a helper, is primarily or essentially, right, by way of inspiring. His inspiration is so powerful that you can't resist it. You feel that you simply want to change, you simply want to tune in, you simply want to align yourself, you simply want to commit yourself. So this is observed and commented on by the Brahmin to the Buddha. And again, the Buddha affirmed that point too. And finally, the fourth point is the Buddha as an exemplar, provides exemplification for the future generation to follow him. So whatever he does, he doesn't just do it just for his own sake. There's always an altruistic dimension there. And that dimension is in the sense of his intention, his awareness, his full awareness of the followers of the future generation looking up to him and thereby getting his guidance, thereby being helped by him, thereby being inspired by him in his very example. So if he chooses to live in the forest and continue with living of simplicity and detachment, he is aware. He is doing that not just for his own peace of mind, but he is doing that to remind, to inspire all the followers about the value of simplicity. So when the generation looks up to him, they begin to think and question, am I living correctly? Am I living meaningfully? Am I living, in spiritual terms, usefully? Have I gone wrong? You need some criteria. You need a frame of reference, and the Buddha provides that. His very example, his life provides that. So these are the four aspects we see emphasized in the early part of the sutta.